Hello, everyone. This is Azraelis. We are back again, and today I wanted to go ahead and talk about something that this is a perfect time to do so. I don't know why this keeps happening. I just woke up again, and I just did a heroic Halls of Lightning. Uh, but something happened, which is a perfect situation to go ahead and talk about. Okay, and what we're going to be talking about today is DPS versus damage done. I want you to understand, okay, this is incredibly important. I think I might have talked about this a little bit in another video, but I wanted a video just devoted to this that I'm hopefully going to call DPS versus damage done. It is absolutely crucial whether you be a just a player, whether you be a raid leader, whether you're an officer in a raid, uh, whether you're doing heroics. It is crucial that you look at both DPS, as you see on here on my recount. I wish I could make it bigger so it was easier to read on the screen, but that's all you're going to get. And damage done. What you're going to see here is here I am as a arcane mage at the top of the DPS chart. Okay, you're going to be sitting there thinking, okay, you did really well, Azur. You know, that's good. Good job. Wrong. As those of you eagle-eyed people, when I switch that over to damage done, are going to be able to see, I actually, of the 3 DPS in our heroic, contributed the least to defeating that boss. There's a lot of people out here who are going to go, how? I mean, I barely did better than the tank. How's that possible? How could you have an incredibly high DPS, or, well, I mean, relatively speaking, I just hit 80 yesterday. So it's like, how could you have a good DPS but not be the person who did the most damage in against a target? This is why it is absolutely crucial that you look at both. You keep your recount or your details, your whatever they call it. I think they call it combat details. I like recount just because it's a little bit simpler. I don't want all the fluff that comes with details. And I'm just used to using recount because I used it all the time back in the day. What's going on in here is this is telling me as a player what's wrong. One of the things that I tell people who are new to this game or people who've been playing this game is your DPS number is a good representation to you if you are playing correctly. Okay, so I know my rotation. I know how to play an arcane mage. This represents that. This number shows you that I'm not properly geared yet. The fundamental issue with arcane mages is that they don't have any consistent damage. Their only form of consistent damage is arcane missiles, which is only able to be used once you get the arcane missile proc. Whereas you're seeing this rogue was way out in front, because rogues, hunters, all these people, and even bear druids, as tanks. A lot of paladin tanks are very good on the damage done meters as well. Some warrior tanks are really good on damage done because they are consistently dealing damage. That means that even though this is a statistical issue, okay, when you're talking about damage per second, you see, everything I was doing was much higher DPS or much higher damage than what everyone else was doing. That's why there's such a big lead here. And it's not a huge lead, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm super awesome or anything. I'm just saying that every instance of damage that I dealt was a lot of damage. So on the DPS meter, I'm out in front because the only statistical data that has been entered into this is that I did a lot of damage with a bunch of different things. More damage than these other people were doing consistently. But when you switch over to damage done, you realize that that lower amount of damage consistently for these other two, this rogue and this elemental shaman, ended up netting more damage done to that target, to Loken. This is the fight that we're on. To Loken, the end boss of heroic Halls of Lightning. It netted more damage done to them. So their damage was much more consistent. These two individuals have builds that are either built for consistent damage or they have gear to back up their build. Me, I do not have the gear to back up my build. So once again, if you're confused, DPS shows me as a player that I am doing my rotation correctly. I am charging up my arcane blasts. I'm hitting my arcane missiles when I'm supposed to. I have my buffs in check. I have all of these things in check. But I don't have the gear, and I find that out from looking at damage done. Because one of the things you'll notice if you're an arcane mage player, when you go and you look at pre-raid DPS or raid DPS, best in slot and stuff, you realize that you need like 500 and some haste, and that's the problem. That's the problem in my build. I don't have enough haste. There is no really good consistent damage that comes out of an arcane mage, so you have to mitigate that by getting enough haste to make yourself more consistent. So that is the subject that I wanted to talk about. I was hoping this was going to be a short video. It looks like it's going to be. You need to look at DPS and damage done. Back in the day, when we were doing Naxxramas and things like that, and we were struggling, I can guarantee you that part of the problem was we were trying to pick up high DPS classes. And we were only looking at this meter right here. There was an assumption that was made that this damage done meter doesn't matter. It does matter. DPS is a perfect tool for you to see if you are playing your class correctly. Damage done tells you what actually happened. Because DPS is in some ways a theoretical. If I was left totally unabated, I didn't have to worry about mana, I didn't have to worry about moving out of AoEs, I didn't have to do any of that, I would have been able to consistently do my damage and do a bunch of damage, and I would have led the damage done meter as well. That damage done meter is what actually happened. So, in summary, use both. It is crucial that you use both, because this is where the full story comes in, with DPS and with damage done. It is very, very straightforward to me, as an arcane mage player, that the problem I'm having is haste. It's obvious to me because I know from looking at the web pages. But let's say I had a fairly good damage done, but a not so great DPS, like these other guys. Like these other guys. What that would tell me is that my rotation was most likely the culprit. I can tell you right now, Ged was using lava bursts when he did not have flame shock on the target. I know that because my focus magic wasn't on all the time. Ged had problems with their rotation. They had the gear to be a DPS, or to be a DPSer as an elemental shaman, but they were messing up their rotation. You see, I already knew that because the focus magic wasn't up all the time. I can see in this, because he didn't beat me, that he was screwing up his rotation. There is so much more that you can learn from the DPS chart than just knowing if you're number one. And sometimes you can be number one and be the least useful member of your team. Keep that in mind. Always look. And this is very important for raid leaders. This is incredibly important for raid officers. Because if you're struggling with raid content, you need to go through, you need to look at both DPS and damage done. And either you can give advice to those players, or you can get someone who's better geared for the content, if that's required. You know, if you're struggling and you have people bail on you, well, don't go looking for somebody who has a super high DPS. Look for someone who has a super high damage done, because maybe that's your problem. The reason back in the day we were struggling so hard with patchwork, this was very early on in Wrath that we were doing that, was because we had a lot of high DPS classes, including myself, but no one was paying attention to damage done. There's easy ways to mitigate that. Let's say you have some arcane mages that just don't quite have the gear, you know, so they are like me, where I'm down here, you know, third in line. Well, maybe think about picking up more hunters. Maybe think about picking up a rogue. Maybe think about picking up, you know, more melee DPS, because melee DPS is fairly typically more based on damage done than they are DPS. And you're going to be a lot happier. One of the great equalizers for that, for DPS and damage done, is a warlock. Affliction locks are great at damage done because they're constantly ticking their damage, no matter what. It doesn't matter if they have to run out of an AoE, those dots are still dealing their damage. Same thing with any class that has a pet, just like a warlock or a hunter. Those pets are still dealing their damage when they're having to maneuver and do stuff like that and get out of things and, you know, whatever. Or they're CC'd, you know, their pet might not be CC'd. So keep that in mind. I don't want this to go over 15 minutes, so we will just wrap this all up with that final thing, and that is always pay attention to DPS and damage done. This is a perfect representation. And once you get used to looking at both of these things, you will be able to isolate the problems that you're having. Right now, I know, without a shadow of a doubt, with this data, that the problem is not in my rotation. It's not in my ability to proc arcane missiles. The problem is with my gear. And that points me directly to where I need to go to make my mage better. I need more haste. I need a lot more haste because I'm coming in third even though I have this super high DPS. I'm coming in third on damage done. So there you go. Both of these pieces of data are crucial. DPS is a good meter to let you know that you're doing well. That what you can do about your damage is correct. You're doing it right. You go to damage done to find out if your gear's not up to par. So, thank you for watching. I'm Azaralis. I assume that this is probably going to be one of the most useful things anyone, well, certain people in this game will ever see. Because I bet you there's a lot of people, just like back in the day, who don't think about damage done. They just get their super high DPS and they don't worry about it. And I'm sure that there's plenty of raids that are out there and guilds that are going through content and wondering the same thing that our raid leader was wondering back in the day. Why is it that I can have a whole entire raid and all of our DPS is just fine, but we're having trouble on a DPS check? Everybody's DPS is meeting the minimum requirement and exceeding the minimum requirement, yet we're still having trouble with a DPS check. You go in here, you look at damage done, and you find the true story. You don't just pay attention to damage done. You use both of these tools to direct you in where you go. So, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. All that kind of jazz. If you want to help out the channel, you can hit up my donation links in the description below because I don't make money on YouTube or Twitch. And hopefully this helps some people out. Peace out. I'll see you on the next one.